Hi guys, this is Niman Kenkre for BlueFirePoker.com, and for today's video we are going to revisit the Protege series and do part 1 of either 2 or 3, depending on how in-depth we get, of a 25-cent, 50-cent no-limit hold'em session that Chris has played. Since we last checked in with Chris, he's had quite a journey. He went flying through the limits, starting at 5 cent, 10 cent, and moving up limits categorically once he hit 30 buy-ins. And he very rapidly moved up 3 or 4 sets of limits, all the way up to 50 cent a dollar. Unfortunately, we weren't able to record at 25.50 his first time through, or at 50 cent a dollar, because he was having technical problems with Camtasia. However, he did at that point hit his first rough patch and went through a pretty nasty losing spell, and has now dropped back down to 25.50. So he recorded this session his second time through at 25.50, which is where you are right now. Am I correct, Chris?
Right on.
Yeah. So, in fact, given that you've had such a volatile journey, really flying through the limits at first, and then having your first setback, maybe you'd like to make a few general comments about what you've learned, how you feel about moving up and moving down, or whatever. Something that might be of value to our viewers.
Well, I just wanted to say that even if I really presence the whole project as like, I'm not counting on the money, I have to be, kind of unattached, and I have to, just do the best I can every day. I found that I'm less likely to, let's say, make a big bluff as I've gotten higher limits. Like, I would definitely make, like, an all-in river bluff, at 25 no limit, let's say, pretty regularly. And I noticed I don't think I've done it very often at $50 no limit or $100 no limit for the brief time I was there. So I think that as much as you want to detach yourself from the fact that it's real money, it's not possible, or at least I haven't been able to do that so far.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a very common problem when people move up, because even when you're ready to move up, when all of a sudden you're playing for double the stakes that you've been playing with for a while, the money seems like it's so much, and all of a sudden it becomes hard to sort of play a high variance style, even if that is highest EV, and it becomes psychologically more difficult to make big bluffs or big thin calls and so on. But you just have to try to overcome that as best as you can. Obviously, you will once you're entrenched in that limit and get used to playing pots the size that you're playing. But when you're first moving up, you have to really try to think of it as units and not as money, and make the same kind of plays that you would make if you were at a limit where you were more comfortable. And it certainly is a issue, a transitional issue in terms of moving up in limits that affects everybody. And the better you can overcome it, the better you're going to do, and the faster you're going to do well at the new limits.
Yeah.
So, you have any other questions or comments, or should we get right to the video?
No, let's do it.
Okay. Just a disclaimer here, guys. We are having a little bit of technical problems with projecting my computer screen onto Chris's, so we're actually going to both be viewing the video respectively on our computers. And so as such, when I pause and stuff, we may get uncalibrated and may have to take a second or two to just get back on at the same time in the video, me and Chris. So it probably won't be much of an issue, but I just wanted to throw that out there just in case that happens. I hope you can bear with us. Chris, I understand you were telling me that right away you have a question about that first hand, the ace-jack on table 4. Is that correct?
Yes. I was wondering if this player, I think he was limping a lot, and I was wondering if I should start raising him from out of position, like out of the blinds, with a hand like ace-jack, which isn't a hand I really love, but it might be likely better than whatever he's holding.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends. That's a good question, and I think that you could just check back, or you could raise. I think if a guy is limping a lot and then playing poorly, you should raise and take control of the hands often. But when you actually do have a decent but not great hand like this, it's okay to just limp along, because you could surprise him with the strength of your hand if you do hit it, and this is a hand that may have some showdown value even if you don't pair up against his range. So a lot depends on how he's going to play, and obviously if you bloat the pot and he calls and he's a decent player, ace jack is going to play a little bit weird out of position, especially when you miss. So I don't mind. I think you just check this, right? And I don't mind that as a play at all. But raising is certainly a viable alternative as well.
Okay.
I think one general thing to take away is if you've got a player who just comes in limping with a lot of hands, and then, to begin with, that's not a real great play. And then if he doesn't play that well post-flop, you should raise with, if it's just you and him in the big blind, or if you can isolate him in position as well, you should raise with a lot of hands and just take control of the hand. And you'll see a lot of situations where players like that will limp and then call, and then it's you and them. You've managed to shut everybody else out of the pot, and then you win it with a flop bet, or maybe win a big pot if you hit something good or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'll run the tape. I don't love your bet there on the king 6-6 board, and the reason is your hand actually doesn't quite need to bet. It's good enough. I think you can check and call a bet here. You know what I mean? Were you betting it for protection?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Sometimes
I'm just pausing the video here.
the term of protection, I think sometimes I've misused it, and I've tried to, I've tried to, use it the best that you've taught me and understand it. And I feel like sometimes like that, like what if say he has, I don't know, 9-8, we know he can have really mostly anything in that position. Why not bet on that flop so that he doesn't hit a stupid 9 or 8?
Yeah. So that is protection against a what is it, a 6 outer. And yeah, that's reasonable. I'm not going to get into it too much. My only point was that your hand is good enough on a board like that that's not likely to hit him. Your hand is good enough that you're not bluffing really when you bet that. You know what I mean? You actually usually have the best hand. You even have a hand that's good enough to just check and call a little bet. If he's going to automatically fire a continuation bet. So. That being said, a little bet for protection is reasonable. I just wanted to make sure you knew why you were betting there.
Yeah.
It's not the same as if you let out there and you had 5-4 in your hand.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which would have been a fine bet, by the way, for a bluff. But, you're betting with the ace-jack for a different reason.
Okay.
All right, so back to the tape.
So there won't be any super interesting hands for a couple of minutes. So
so we'll pick up on some of the game flow. We can talk. We can just talk about general stuff to fill in the time as well. It's not really good. It doesn't make for a good video to have a lot of silence. So, if when stuff is coming up, if you have any general questions or something or just comments, I think that'll be good.
Okay.
Now I see you lining up a 3-bet there with the Queen 9 of Hearts, and I assume I'm going to pause here because you've also got the Jack's hand that I want to talk briefly about. You're 3-betting that one because it's a decent hand, but you feel it's not quite good enough that you could profitably call. Is that correct?
Yes, and this particular player was raising every button.
Okay.
So I thought that might also help my plan.
Okay, yeah, and so you got a lot of fold equity. That's fine. A hand like this is one that I would typically, against most players, I feel like I can call this profitably, so I would usually call. But as long as it's if you don't think that it's a profitable call, then it's certainly a good hand to re-raise with. So I like to play. I like the just call there in position with jacks for reasons that I've talked about many times. So I do like your play there as well. And if you remember do you remember what you were about to do here with facing the raise, the min raise when you have ace jack on the small blind? Are you going to 3-bet?
I actually don't. I think I may have just called, but I just wanted to comment briefly that Queen 9 hand that's the kind of thing too. Remember I talked about my river bluffs? That's another subset of hand where I'm glad that I did re-raise there. I may have leaned toward calling, but not for the reasons that you would, because you want to play a flop and it's profitable, but because
Because you don't want to blow up a pot and create a high
yeah,
variance style.
exactly. I'm afraid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You got to break free from that. I mean, as you play more hands at the levels that you do, you'll become more comfortable with making the best play, irrespective of how much money that involves. But in order to be successful, I mean, that's why we're dealing with a buffer of like 30 buy-ins, so that if you do run into a bad patch of variance, you can step down. Um, so you really need to condition yourself and force yourself to make the best play, even if that involves a high variance play, a big bluff, or a big thin call or whatever. So I'm glad you're at least realize that about yourself. But you do want to deal with it better, if you will.
yeah.
All right, so I'll continue the video here. Yeah, but I like the re-raise with the ace-jack too. If the guy, especially because he only min-raised there, I definitely like the re-raise. And of course with the pocket jacks, that's a clear bet because you presume he would have bet a king, and he could easily check call a hand like a 10 or some kind of cornball draw or something like that. So clearly that's a bet as well. And once again, and very good flop for you to continuation bet once you 3-bet with the ace-jack. Obviously you completely missed it, but it's a flop that there's going to be little that he could continue with, if he doesn't have like the ace of diamonds, he's not going to be able to continue unless he also has a pair or something, or unless he's got a good queen. So well played, all three hands, tables 1, 2, and 4 there. That was well done.
Yeah, I guess those were somewhat interesting. I guess I was pretty confident I had done the right thing or something. I didn't have a question about it.
Yeah. No, those were all well played.
I'm gonna get goofy with the ace queen here, though. I know in a second on table 4.
Okay.
Post flop.
Well, thanks for the warning, I guess. Any reads on the players that you want to talk about so far, or no?
No, just that this Ray in table 4 has a propensity to call. I don't know what I was doing here.
No, the check's actually fine. It's good. It's the kind of board that's not really draw heavy, and there's no worse hands are going to call you when you bet, but no better hands are going to fold. Maybe ace king might fold, but I mean he's not likely to have ace king there. So I think you're never going to fold out a pair on that flop.
Well, I guess what I wanted to ask you was my logic to it was right, that the board was like, just like you said, it wasn't a thing where I was going to get a better hand to fold, so that's great that I was on that. But I felt like it was an opportunity to kind of mix it up, so to speak, even though maybe I don't need to mix it up against that particular player, where, like, I'm going to be continuation betting, like, all the time, right? So there's got to be times when I'm not, right, because I don't hit every flop.
Yep.
So you think that's a good line of...
Yeah, absolutely. That's and you made a very good point. Is that when you are the pre-flop raiser, especially in a pot that's heads up to the flop, you're going to make the continuation bet the overwhelming majority of the time, 90% plus or whatever. So you want to look for opportunities where you can balance and check back, because you don't want to be in a situation where every time you check back, your opponent can just steal the pot away from you. And this is a good situation to check back, because it's not a board in which he's likely to, if he's behind, the most number of outs he's going to have is 6. And he's never going to call you with a worse hand, and he's never going to fold a better hand. So it's definitely a good spot to check back. Definitely not an auto continuation bet. So I definitely like that. I think it was a good play.
Great.
You could have now on the turn. You could have bet. I'm going to pause here again. The turn when he checked again, the check back is all right, but you can be pretty sure now you probably have the best hand. But just in case he's got, there's two different um, uh, cards that have open-ended straight draw. A 6 and a 3 are both an open-ended straight draw on the turn. And if he's got any of that, there's a lot of like corny cards that could hit that could be kind of ugly. And so I think at this point you could actually bet the turn for protection. I don't hate a check, but I would prefer a bet on the turn.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I considered it, and I was thinking about another thing you've taught me, which I found to be really brilliant, is that what's my credibility? You know what I mean? Like I checked the flop, so now like I'm betting the turn, and I may not need any credibility because, like you said, there's no better hand that's going to fold. But since I did check the flop, I said, okay, well, it's not like he's gonna all decide I have a good hand now. So that credibility argument probably helped me more in like 3-bet pots, right?
Yes,
Because,
yes, definitely, and that's a very valid point. But if this player is not the kind of player who's just going to say, because now remember, I want to pause here to talk about that. That's a very good point. When you bet the turn, you don't have much credibility. There's not too often that you're going to check on that flop and then suddenly come to life on that 5 turn card and actually have anything. However, you have to go one level below that, one level beyond that, I mean, and ask if this Ray character, is he the kind of player who is A, going to figure that out, and then B, exploit that. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm sitting there in his shoes, I might just, call BS on you, and when you bet the turn, I might just check raise and then bet the river. You know what I mean? Just leaving, just saying, you can't just check back that flop and then try to take it away from me on the turn like that. But if you don't think that he's capable of doing that, because remember, the overwhelming likelihood is that he has nothing there too. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a nothing against nothing thing, in which your nothing is probably better than his too. So because of that, I think that it behooves you to go ahead and make that bet, just for the purposes of protection. Especially now because there's so many cards that are gonna look ugly on the turn. You know what I mean? That not only can he pair up and then just win, but then you may not be able to get value. Even if you hit your ace, that completes a 4-card straight draw, et cetera, et cetera. So if you think, so the bottom line, if you thought that he's capable of making a move with nothing when you bet because he knows you have nothing, then that check back is particularly, is the better play. But if you don't think he's capable of that, then you should go ahead and bet. Because remember, as we've talked before, you don't want to project your own level of understanding of poker and your own stuff that you would do onto your opponents. You want to play against them, not against what you would do if you had their cards in their position. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
But it was a good point. It definitely was a good point. That you're not going to have much credibility there. So far, so good, though. I like your play here. And I don't have any issue with anything you've done so far. I think table 1. Okay. No, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I think you missed a little bit of an opportunity here on table 1.
Yeah, I did.
He can never, ever, ever have the board beat, considering that he did not bet on the turn. And a pot that had nothing in it, so he would have had a chance to build a pot. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I wouldn't worry too much about it. It was one of those dumb ones where I was paying attention to table 2 and table.
Okay, all right. Because what I would have done is I would have made like a big bet on the river, but when you decide to check, which is all right, because if you make a river bet, he's liable to call. When you check and he has the audacity to bet that, I would make a check raise for sure. You know what I mean? For sure. It's impossible. Given that there was nothing in the pot, if he had a queen, he had an opportunity to build a pot by betting on the turn. He simply cannot have a queen there. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
that pot is, when he tries to bet that, that pot should belong to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just a small case of not seizing an opportunity. Um, I think I like a bet with the nines.
Yeah.
I don't like the check on the flop. It's not terrible, but your hand is overwhelmingly likely to be good and does need a little bit of protection. So I think you should, obviously you're not folding a king, but I think you should bet it anyway. Because he's very unlikely in that position to have tens or better. So if he doesn't have a king, you have the best hand, and you should just go ahead and bet it there. You know what I mean? You don't want like a jack to come off on the turn, and then now all of a sudden you're in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a clear flop bet, I believe. Yeah. Again, when I saw that king ten, I thought this is a good spot for a three bet. I really like I like what you're doing. Your hand is a little bit not good, quite good enough to call profitably. I think you get into reverse implied odd situations sometimes, but it's too good to fold against a random button opener. So it's a good spot to take control.
Yeah. Um, those hands I've been my decision has been finally made though by like what do I know about the player, and
Yep.
this guy and the other guy I told you about, they're frequent pre-flop raisers, especially on the button.
Yep.
So
By the way, quick comment. I don't know how he's going to respond to the second bet, but very good second barrel. Um,
thank you.
yeah, it's clearly the queen is a very very good card. When he calls you there on the flop, he didn't re-raise your three bet. Now he just calls on the flop. Unless he's slow playing a set, the queen is pretty much guaranteed to have overcarded whatever he has, and you're showing so much strength and so much heat, and he's got to feel like if even if he calls that 15, he's then got to call the rest of your stack on the river. So it was an excellent card, and he didn't have a draw on the flop either. It's very unlikely because the board was so draw free. So this is definitely an extremely good card to fire second barrel. And if he just calls there, depending on what you know of him, and another big card comes on the river, like a jack or an ace, I would definitely bet again on a king for value. Probably check on a 10 and hope it checks down. Jack or an ace, you can probably profitably fire a third barrel there.
Right. And it was also, again, it went to that thing you taught me before about like if I had checked there on the turn, it's like I've given up, right?
Yep. Well, I mean, but do keep in mind, sometimes you do need to just give up. Like, for instance, if that turn card was an 8, I think it's best to just check fold. You know what I mean? But that was a very good check, very good card to keep up the charade.
An 8 would have been. I feel like I might have bet an 8 also because I feel like he's the type that might have been probing to see what, if he could
Yeah,
take it
but
away.
I don't know. Like, it doesn't really. I mean, if whatever he could have called you there on the flop, he's liable.
Yeah.
Like the 8, it could have even helped him even more. Given him two pair or a draw to go with his pair. Or if it didn't, if he had an overcard, overpair, he still has an overpair, and it's going to be hard to fold that in those spots. So I think like an 8, a 6, a low card there would have been a bad one to fire again.
You know what? The biggest card in that situation though, that gives me a hard time is if the turn had been an ace. I think you're going to tell me I should bet it, but it just gives me a hard time figuring out if he could have been floating with an ace or whatever.
Well, what you can do with an ace, I think a second barrel with an ace is pretty good there. You know, obviously you want to see some players that just call that flop bet with ace high. You don't want to do that against them. You want to identify those. There are some players that do that. It's not a good play, but you see players that do that. Try to identify them and don't bet aces against them. But another thing you can do, if an ace comes, you have a little bit less credibility, but you can check the turn, and then if it checks through, you can bet the river. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that line does have credibility. It does look like a whiffed continuation bet that then connected on an ace. It does,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think you can. An ace is usually a good card to fire again on the turn or on the river. If you do check the turn, you can fold. I usually like just keeping on betting on the turn on an ace. Although you have to sort of have a beat on your opponent and know if he's the kind of player who would have floated with ace high.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah, the queen was one of the best cards in the deck. That was well done. Note that if he calls you on the turn, you're probably winning the pot on an, unless he's slow playing a set, on an ace, a king, a jack, and probably a 10 too. A 10 where you
Hey,
just,
pause it for a second.
yep,
I wanted to ask you about table four,
yeah,
the 10-9.
yeah. Well, there was just a limp to you, right?
Right, and it's that same guy though. That he's like
Yeah, this is
limping all the
definitely
time.
that's what I was talking about. Especially when you've got position, you've got a bad player who's just limping in a lot. You want to be raising him a lot. I mean, with all but your crappiest hands, and then just isolate him. If when he, I mean, it's pretty much if you've got a guy who's limping and then calling, and then checking and folding if he doesn't, hit. It's profitable to isolate him in position with any two cards, and certainly, a couple of connected cards like a 10-9. So, um, so when you see a player doing that, and I mean, I would assume that as you move up, you won't see too many of those. But when you see players limping in, it's a very weak play, limping and then calling. You want to isolate them in position as much as you can, and especially if you've got folds to you and you're sitting on the button with 10-9, that's definitely a mistake not to raise there.
Yeah, okay. I thought so. I was on the fence and then I let it go, but
Yeah, I mean, you don't need much of a hand against guys like this. You just keep picking up these medium-sized pots, keep picking up these medium-sized pots, against them. So, um, you know, if you've got a bad player at your table, you want to take advantage. You want to get into as many pots with them as you can, and that's the way to do it. By shutting everybody else out.
okay.
Good question. I'm glad you asked. I had forgotten that that was the player that was doing that. Yeah, and in this case, you would have had the nuts.
Yeah.
So far, we're only about 8 minutes into actual game time, but I have to say, so far I'm very pleased. Other than a few missed opportunities here and there, I think your play has been technically outstanding, the best I've seen so far.
Cool.
I've mentioned to you that I've noticed. Real quick, you don't think Jack 8 of Diamonds you can call on the button profitably?
Yeah, I think I could have.
Okay, yeah, I think you should be calling that one. If the guy, it's not a great hand, and if that guy Tristan is a particularly good player, you could fold it. But I think it's
No, he's pretty you can see right through him, like he kind of a continuation bet. So really I should have been making a lot more calls against him. I
yeah,
think
yeah. Remember the here's a general concept, that'll make sense when I phrase it this way, but you might not have realized it. The more of an advantage you have over your opponents, the more of a better poker player you are than your opponents, the more you can accept uh, um, a disadvantage pre-flop to enter pots with them, because you're going to make that up in terms of your EV of being able to play correctly, whether that means stealing pots or getting paid when you're big or not paying them off when they're big later. You know what I mean?
absolutely, it's kind of intuitive, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's why. I mean, you look at on our site on Bluefire, you have two of the loosest players. I mean, I venture to say in the world, in me and Jiggy Martin, and I think we both do that because we feel like we have a significant edge over the competition. So that means you just play more hands with them. You're going to have more opportunities to you know to put yourself in plus EV situations, even accepting a little bit of a minimal disadvantage earlier. You know what I mean?
Right, right. You might want to pause it a second too,
Yep.
because table four, um, I'm pretty sure I fold this,
Yeah, I
and
think I think I had a feeling you might ask about that one. Yeah, I think that's fine. If you face a bet here, I think a fold is in order. I know it's a little bit. It looks a little bit nice because you've now got that open-ended straight draw. But with four people seeing the flop, I mean, you could be completely crushed. You could be against Jack 10. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and even if you're not, if someone plays with you, you I mean, what do you really want? Even if you hit your set, you're not happy. You pretty much want exactly a five, a non-club five. So I definitely agree with a fold to any kind against any kind of a bet here.
I thought it was definitely a fold. I just wanted to ask you just
Yeah,
in case.
yeah. It's a good question because like it looks appealing, but especially with four seeing the flop, it's no question that you're exactly right. It's a very easy fold. Should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead. Just to finish up on another topic about me calling with Jack 8, sometimes I found recently that when I'm playing and I'm trying to call a frequent raiser, it's like other guys get wise, or maybe they don't even get wise. They're just frequent re-raisers. And then I get into a really interesting scenario where, I have to defend against the idea, the possibility that
Of the
I'm going to
squeeze?
call and they're going to re-raise.
Yeah.
And if they squeeze big, you can't make the call. I know you told me one thing I can do, which is cool, is I can start like calling raises with like aces or kings, right?
Yes.
And then if it gets squeezed, I can win a huge pot, So
Exactly. Or just start, just re-raise the squeezer too. You know what I mean? And depending on, you just have to evaluate frequencies. If you see a guy that's just squeezing a lot, and especially if there's a raise in the cutoff and you call on the button and the blinds just can't resist, you can even if you haven't called with a premium hand, you can then turn it into a bluff. You can re-raise the squeezer. You know what I mean? You just have to keep your frequencies in order.
Right.
On table 3, did you bet the flop? What was the action on the flop?
Table 3, yeah, I believe I did.
Okay, yep, that's fine.
He had limped pre-flop.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then so much the better, yeah. See, by the way, here you go again. Here you go. Somebody who limps pre-flop is typically not going to be a good player. I'm just going to pause here. Table 3, you're on the button with King 10, and in a four-handed game, and the cutoff limps. You should be raising that 100% of the time. You're definitely missing a plus EV opportunity when you don't.
I get that.
Okay, I mean, don't let people get away with that bad play of like limping, especially when you're on position. You just beat on them until, it's just very, very plus EV. I mean, when people are habitually limping, and especially when you can isolate in position, I mean, you could do it with a lot weaker hands than King 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more or less profitable to do with any two, as long as they don't know you're doing it with any two,
Yeah, I think...
I see you are doing it now with the ace-5, which is good to see.
I think sometimes I'm waiting too long for more evidence on a player or something, and I have to just go for it because it's...
Well, I mean, one glaring piece of evidence is a player that is just open limping. I mean, you just don't see that very often, and it's very rarely a reasonable play.
Right.
And if you see a guy doing it a lot, you can be pretty sure that he is a fish. Whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I'm seeing my first mistake unless you can justify why you're doing that. I absolutely hate that raise with the King 10. Absolutely hate it. You're going to have to explain that one.
I think it's just player specific.
But what do you think's going to happen? You think you're going to get... I mean, your hand doesn't need protection if you're ahead. It's pretty dry board. You're not going to fold.
I disagree with you. This guy, or a lot of people, he could have, 7-8, 4-3. He could have 4-7. If you notice, this guy is in a lot.
Well, he could have that. He could, but I mean, even against those hands, I mean, is it possible he would come back over you?
No, but he could have. No, it's not. But he could have those, and he could have let's say pocket nines, and he may call the raise with pocket nines. So I guess if you think, is that a play I always make? No, absolutely not. The default play for me there is to call. So, I think which is what you'd want to hear. But the in that case against that player, that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
And
so you think this player is liable to have a straight draw. B, that he wouldn't re-raise you and make you fold out the best hand, and C, that he would actually call this kind of raise with a hand like pocket nines.
yeah, absolutely. B is for sure. He would never re-raise me and make me fold a winner. And C is also possible, but he might fold too. So
Okay,
it's
all right, okay, I can buy it then. In general, this would be a very bad play, but I'm actually really proud. Not to sound patronizing, but in that case, because you've taken a rule that I've given you and made an exception that was a correct exception for a player-specific thing then, which is good to see. You're not following the rules I give you blindly. Like, in general, this would be a very poor spot to raise. The board is very draw-free. You've got you've got a pair that can't really be overcarded except by an ace. So it's a clear way ahead, way behind situation. However, given what you're telling me about the opponent, that if he re-raises you here, you can comfortably fold. You're always behind, and he can chase with draws, and he can call you worse when you raise here. Then by all means, this is a very good spot to make an exception to the rule, and I congratulate you.
cool, and it's a good marker to show that you're what you said about really thinking about hands and it'll start coming naturally. I mean, I don't think I put much thought into it though. I think it was kind of like I felt it, like it becomes like game flow, like you talk about. I was just like, okay, this is the move.
That's fantastic, Chris. I'm really glad to hear that. I mean, I don't want this to turn into our own private lesson. I won't want to talk about stuff that's valuable for all of Blue Fire, obviously, but it's the kind of thing. I'm gonna while I talk, I'm gonna continue playing the video here. Actually, let me pause. There's a little bit too much going on because also on the board, I want to see what you do on table 4. I'm going to keep talking first. I've mentioned that in our conversations, I see how much you've improved in over the course of a few months, and it's really great to see. But sometimes it's hard to pick up on things like game flow. It's easy to teach you technical things, and to give you rules and templates, but it takes a little bit more to be able to find the exceptions to that and why you're doing it. And one of the things I'm very happy to see in this session is that any time you've made a play, if it was a bad play, you've realized it was a bad play, and if it was an unorthodox play that wasn't a bad play, you have a very clear, tangible reason to do it. You're not on autopilot, and that's what's going to make you really improve. And it is this approach that is going to serve you really well as you move up through the ranks.
Great.
All right, so
now I got an unpleasant surprise
yeah,
on table 2 by.
it's kind of annoying too because you're getting such a fantastic overlay. However, my feeling is that you should just fold this. I think that.
I think I do. I think I smell the danger, and I fold it.
I think you might not even be good if you hit 2 pair or a king. So they. Meanwhile, what was going on there on table 4? I was so intent on watching the table 2 that I didn't see what happened on the flop. Did you bet the flop, or has it just checked all the way?
No, I bet the flop and I checked the turn.
Okay, that's fine. So that's exactly what I would like to have seen against this player. And now you hit your trip 5, so obviously you're betting the river. Yep. Okay, perfectly played then. That's an interesting re-raise, huh? I really, really like. I gotta say, I'm gonna pause here. I think I was saying to myself, "Oh, put him all in," and I was, I was really hoping to see you do that. I know that the overwhelming majority of players, when they bet that river and then face a raise, they would happily call, but they would only just call. However, in this case, if I'm not mistaken, you again took a player-specific thing. is that this guy seems to be very fishy, tendency to overplay, and second of all, even if he has he may check raise like a 5 there or something, but if he does that, you've got him out kicked. And
Right.
furthermore, putting him all in is only $8 more. So if he did decide to make a check raise with like a king or something, now all of a sudden he's in a position where to make a crying call. You know what I mean? Because he's not going to want to fold for $8 into a pot of 50. So that and furthermore, it's very difficult for him to have you beat. He could have 7-6, but
Yeah, and actually I knew he couldn't though, because there's no way after I check back on the turn that player tries to check raise the river. It's just totally illogical.
oh, he would just bet the river. You're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I could see him trying to check raise the turn for sure, but
Right, and then he would bet the river. Yeah, yeah. So then most likely he's either just got a complete airball or he hit trip fives. In which case, you're winning against trip five. So that was very well done. I really like. I mean, the hand played itself out, but I really like your getting max value by putting in that last raise.
Yeah. Great. And I mean, it comes down to too, like, if I'm going to call the raise, if it's a lot of times, maybe it's not particularly to that situation, although I think it was, if you're going to call that much of a raise, whatever it is, like, then you're good, in large enough time to, I'm kind of getting tongue-tied because now I'm changing my opinion. So forget what I was just about to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I knew where you were going to go with there, and I was going to tear that apart. So
yeah,
we'll
no, I didn't say it though.
All right, we'll just pretend that we didn't hear anything. Because if you were going to say that if you can call, then you may as well just shove the extra, then I was
no,
gonna,
not may as well.
then yeah, I was gonna have an issue with that. But I'm glad you caught yourself. I think we're about 42 or 43 minutes into the video and about 15 minutes into actual playtime. So we'll probably make this a 3-part video. I mean, has the rest of the session, is it sort of similar to this in terms of depth of hands and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of interesting spots to talk about. So
okay, good. So we'll let this go another couple of minutes. And then we'll wrap this video up, and then we can just record immediately on the heels of this. We can record the next one, and we'll make it looks like we should be able to get 3 good videos. And now that you're moving up, and the caliber of your thought process is really high, such that players that are way above the 25, your limits should be able to get a lot out of it. I think we can make 3 videos out of this, and I think people will hopefully be happy. It seems like people are enjoying the series. Obviously, as always, guys, give us feedback. Give me feedback in my blog and in the you can write in Chris's blog as well as in the video section.
I just want to say briefly. A second ago, I folded a 6-5 on the button. I feel like just like I wanted to check back with that ace queen earlier because of the kind of the frequencies.
Yep.
I don't want to raise every button too. Do you agree with that? Like maybe whatever 80% of buttons, and also it's player specific. Like what kind of resistance am I going up against? Because I've learned that sometimes somebody always just relinquishes. So why play around and sometimes fold if they're folding?
Exactly. Like balance is an important thing in poker, but only if your players are good enough to pay attention. And if they're not, if they're gonna take the same action to the same mistakes every time, then just keep doing the same things. You don't need to be balanced against players that you don't need to be balanced against. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now on table 3, are you contemplating a raise here?
Yes, and I think I end up raising because this fellow was like really unorthodox and strange. And now, of course, I'm totally clear that if you could pause it, I'm totally clear that if he's not going to call with anything worse, that I'm beating, then it's a stupid raise, right?
Right.
But my idea is that he will that he would actually call because of his stack and what the pot is
Right, right.
that he may call with ace high.
Yeah,
He
I
may
actually,
call.
yeah. No, I mean, I think you were speaking preemptively because you thought I wouldn't like a raise. I was actually on the fence about a raise there myself because it really doesn't look like he's got a king there. I don't think he would check call a flop and then bet two into nine, and then another 2.5 into whatever that was on the river. So, I while I would not expect him to call with much, I actually was leaning towards the raise myself. I don't hate the fact that you
Oh,
just
he
called, but
didn't raise. Yeah, I remember it was very torn.
because also it can sort of look like um, you could look like you're raising like spades, for instance, because just making a regular standard continuation bet on the flop and then calling, not raising, but just calling a little small bet on the turn when he bets into you, it looks kind of like a spade draw. And he's probably thinking if he has a king, why wouldn't he raise there, etc. And then the seven becomes less likely just mathematically because now another one hits. You know what I mean? So you could also have a pair under the seven that now got counterfeited. So I think there was value in a raise there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know what it was. I think I decided in the end the only hands that he would call me with that I'm beating are ace high hands, and unfortunately he ended up having an ace high hand, and it's probably the range is probably good enough though. Where yeah, right, the EV is that I should have raised. So
Right, right, right.
I learned one there though. You saw I was thinking, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I don't, like I said, I don't hate just calling, but I think it's a little bit better to raise, and I think that you were thinking along the same. I mean, more important than doing exactly what was technically exactly right in one spot is making the is having the right thought process. And you not only had the right thought process, but you also thought it was close. Clearly, as you tanked about thinking about raising, and so I think that you were dead on there. I just think that you didn't quite evaluate it correctly. It was probably higher EV to raise there, but you never know. I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have called with an ace, and maybe the few times he does have a king, he might have played it that way. Who knows? So I think I think I'm even though I think that the raise would have been better, I'm more looking to the thought process, and I like to see. I'm glad to see what I'm seeing from you.
cool. Yeah, I'm looking to the thought process too. So it's good. I got my eye on the big picture.
Yeah, great. I think this brings us to a pretty good stopping point. Actually, that was a good final little hand to discuss, and I think we're about 47 or 48 minutes in, and about a third of the way into your actual playing session. So we could stop here and pick up from here next time. Do you have any questions or any final comments or anything you want to make?
No, I'm just I'm excited about the way it's going, and that the hands that you're thinking about are the ones I was thinking about. So it's definitely a good sign.
Yeah, I think we were more in sync, like which means that you're improving on this video than any previous one. So you continue to make very good progress, and I'm very happy. I hope you can continue to do that. Just for your own sake and my sake as your teacher, as well as hopefully this will be somewhat inspiring and motivating to other people in your position here on Blue Fire. So great. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Like I said, you can follow Chris's journey on his blog at the name of the blog is Not Good Yet. And give us feedback in the blog, my blog, and his blog in the forums, wherever you want. And I think I also started a thread for if you wanted to generate a discussion about his journey and things that make it applicable to yourselves. In the general poker discussion forum. So a welcome discussion there as well. Me and Chris will both check in there periodically. Hope you're enjoying the Protege series. Hope Chris continues to improve the way he has. This is Niman Kenkre for BlueFirePoker.com.